All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. We're so excited to have our good friend Steve Blair back to continue his series focused on leadership and culture. And today, Steve welcomes Alexis Rivera Scott. We've seen a lot about her on LinkedIn. At least I have been excited to get to know her and excited to see her as Steve's guest. She's the co-founder of Verbatim. Just a couple things before we get started. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors, Westrock Coffee and Cameron Smith and Associates, for sponsoring this series. Also, just remind everyone that is joining us live, this is intended to be a conversation, not a presentation, and we invite you to participate by clicking on the Q&A button at any time and submitting your questions, comments, any sort of insight you might want to share with Steve, and he'll be moderating those as they come in. Other than that, we're so glad that you're here. Steve, let's get started.
Thank you, Matt. Yes. Hi, everybody. We're back from a short summer hiatus. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm Steve Blair and spent most of my career on the sales side of the world and always had a love for people and passion for recruiting and training, and had a chance about 9 or 10 years ago to get to do that full time. I spent the last year helping a handful of small startups try to scale their people operations and their culture, because I feel really strongly that everybody deserves to love their job and have a really healthy culture. And so about 3 months ago, I started with an organization full-time that was going to start as a client. And that is a company called Island Ventures. And they're a portfolio company. They're a house of portfolio companies with lots of investments in a couple of different industries. And then I'm working full-time with their largest portfolio company, where most of their people are, and trying to get that culture back on the right track. I feel great with the progress that we're making. And so I'm essentially getting to put my money where my mouth is, and try to put some of the things to test that I like to talk about. I get to do it for real, like in the real world. But you're not here to hear about me. You're here for us to chat with Alexis. So this is Conversations on Leadership and Culture. And what I do normally is invite on a guest that I think has a unique perspective or a unique view of the world of work, of teams, of culture. And sometimes, many times, honestly, that person has some connection to the CPG industry. Conversations on Retail, that's what we do. Sometimes I get to invite on people that I think are really unique and have a really unique perspective that may not touch CPG directly, or in her new role, she might actually. We're hoping to maybe get a client or two out of today's discussion. But Alexis, great story. So I met Alexis during when we were all home for COVID, and I was listening to a podcast that focuses on work culture and healthy workplaces, and she was the guest. And I joined it, I think, late, or I either didn't pay attention to the intro. And the whole time she's talking, I'm assuming she's a chief people officer somewhere, because she is just all about culture and people and healthy environments. And so after the podcast, I shoot her a note on LinkedIn. Of course, she responds right away, because she's the queen of LinkedIn, the fairy LinkedIn mom. We'll get there in a second. And then we became virtual friends, and we've been chatting back and forth and encouraging each other in our endeavors. And so she has two really unique experiences that I'm excited to bring to this conversation. The first one is during her journey over the last few years, she I'm going to let her tell the story, but she started a practice called the Fairy Job Mom. And she basically helps people navigate career opportunities, career transitions, career strategies. So I want to talk to her about that and the importance of culture in organizations through a candidate's eyes, and then also through the organization's eyes about a candidate. And then she just recently launched a company with Brianna called Verbatim. And I'm going to let her tell you more about both of those. But man, I am so excited to welcome my LinkedIn friend, Alexis, to the conversation today. Alexis, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Steve, happy to be here.
Tell folks a little about Fairy Job Mom, and then tell folks about Verbatim, and then we'll jump in.
Okay, so the Fairy Job Mom is really a passion project of mine. I was in a very unhappy work situation, and it inspired me to create something for people to not have to be in unhappy work situations. Even prior to that, I was always connecting people to new roles, advising friends on how they can position themselves and market themselves into their next role. And I think really it's about helping people become what I call eternally employable. So I do hourly coaching. I also have a program called Eternally Employable, but really it's how can you market yourself into your next best career move, not just a job. Really, what is it that you want to do, and how can you position yourself to succeed in that? So that's the Fairy Job Mom.
Love it. And the concept that I love that you just touched on is I like to coach people that I don't ever want anybody to be a seat filler. In other words, there's an open seat. I need a job. I'm going to apply and fill that seat. Like, the dream is that everybody is uniquely needed somewhere, somehow. And if we can find a way to link those two things up, man, that's when magic happens. And I love that that's what you're doing. You're helping people do that. That's awesome.
And I think, I say that with the caveat that the market right now can be very challenging. So, there is that internal conversation that you do need to have. If there are job seekers watching and or listening to this conversation, that you might need to take a job right now. If you have bills to pay, kids to feed, whatever it is, that's okay. But while you're doing that, also take the time to position yourself for when that next really incredible opportunity comes up, you're ready. You're ready to apply. You're ready to interview. You've been networking. You've set yourself up for success for that next best thing. And this comes to mind only because I got a call last night from someone who, she's a recruiter. She got laid off, when all the recruiters were getting cut at the end of last year. And she was considering leaving recruiting. She ended up taking a staffing role that she is not super thrilled about. And she just got a call yesterday from a very large organization that she is just beside herself excited about potentially working with. And I told her, I said, look, it's all about timing. We don't control the timing, unfortunately. And so you did what you had to do. And now the stars are aligning. You've done all the right things. So go get that job. It's waiting for you. I get like tingles thinking about all these stories, like wonderful people who just deserve so much. And it's like, it will happen. If I can play just the tiniest part in that, it like brings me so much joy.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So then if that wasn't enough,
yes,
you connected with another, I think, LinkedIn friend that you guys met originally, I think, or maybe at a conference. I can't remember. But tell us about Brianna and Verbatim.
Yeah. So I just launched my other company, Verbatim. There's another wing called Influence by Verbatim, and I'll get into that later. But I actually met Brianna Doe through a LinkedIn creator group. She and I are both passionate about two things: helping people get hired and marketing. So she is a classically trained marketer. She's been in marketing for over a decade. My formal marketing experience is shorter than that. Prior to that, I was largely sales focused and career focused. But she came to me one day and she said, I want to start an agency and I want to start it with you. And I did the whole thing of
me?
Are you talking to me? Really? And she's like, yeah, you are literally the only person that I could imagine doing this with. And I just, I gave it some good hard thought because I had started the Fairy Job Mom and I was like, am I going to somehow lose that part of me? And I just came to the conclusion that, I do the Fairy Job Mom because I love to do the Fairy Job Mom. It's a passion of mine, but that doesn't mean that I can't explore other incredible things with someone who I respect and trust and am so excited to work with. So Verbatim, our overarching company, focuses on marketing for all types of businesses. We love working with mission-driven companies. It's a passion of ours. Helping people help other people is so exciting. We focus on demand generation, growth marketing, content strategy, and then LinkedIn influencer marketing, which is Influenced by Verbatim. It's a little sub-brand, but we help connect creators and influencers with incredible brands and help amplify their voices. So that's a lot.
Awesome.
But I'm very passionate and very excited about what we're working on.
Well, I'll say this. If you are a CPG brand listening, watching, maybe your in-store marketing could use a little boost with some social strategy. And man, I would love for you to reach out to Alexis and see if she can help you guys. All right, well, let's shift gears and talk about culture. That's what I want to talk about today. And you have a unique perspective, a number of unique perspectives. One, you've worked in a couple of different cultures, some SaaS, B2B SaaS. You've done small team, large team, and then now you and a partner are building a culture like from scratch.
Yep.
And so I want to get all there. But before we go there, everybody has their own unique definition of culture. There's probably a million. If you Google it, there's lots and lots and lots of definitions of culture. How do you think about what culture is of an organization? How would you define culture?
I think and I didn't plan like a definition, right? I didn't write it down or anything. I think inherently culture is how an organization makes their employees feel, right? What does it feel like to work there? Is it inclusive? Is it positive? Is it motivating? It's not something that you can like touch, right? It's very much an emotional state of being in my mind. And you see it through the interactions of the employees. You see it through the communication of the company. You see it through the way they treat their customers.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it. Yeah. You mentioned you can't touch it. I think you're right. I know you're right, but I've seen really cool examples of where organizations that have done it right from the beginning can add some physical touch manifestations of their culture, whether it's in the office space, whether it's in the products that they have. But certainly it's the feel. It's the feel of the people. Some people call it the smell of the place, is one old, fairly dated definition of culture.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Okay. So you've been in a lot of different organizations. I would love if you could share with us, I ask everybody this question: what was your first experience with all of a sudden it hit you like, oh, this is what culture is, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience? Like, what was the first time in your career journey, or maybe even before you started your career journey, where you were feeling a certain way about an organization and it hit you that like, oh, I'm feeling this way because that's the culture here. And it either resonates with me or it doesn't resonate with me. You have an example of that?
I would say most recently. So like within the last 5 years or so, and keep in mind, I'm not a spring chicken by any means. So I've had lots of experience prior to that, but I don't think that I was necessarily aware of like true like company culture. So I worked in hospitality for many years. So I worked in hotels and in hotel sales prior to moving into technology and marketing and travel. And I never really like paid attention, I want to say. Like they had events for us as employees and it was fine. Some were more fun than others and what have you, but I never really identified with it as a culture. Then when I moved to a travel tech company, that was more of like where you feel the culture, right? Mm-hmm. You start to notice behaviors amongst the company that are just the norm. Now, I'm not saying they're the norm for any other company, but it's like, oh, everybody does this or everybody does that.
This is a part of the DNA of this organization.
Exactly.
How they respond, how they act. Yeah.
Exactly. And some were positive and some were, in hindsight, probably actually not that positive. I did leave that company with a really great experience. I made incredible relationships and connections there. But when I moved on and I landed at a company that had a culture that really aligned with my own values and the way in which I would run a company, that's when I kind of looked back in hindsight and went, wait a minute, I was a little bit unhealthy in XYZ ways. Mm-hmm. So it's an evolution. I moved on from that company and ended up landing at a company that I would not recommend to anyone. Like even people I don't like, I'd still say, don't go work there. So
that's saying something.
Yeah. So yeah, moving on to now where I'm at with Brianna and building our own company, it's very important. We had the discussion from like starting to build our website of like, okay, what are our values? What do we want this to look like? What happens when we do add on employees? What do we want their experience to be like? And we've thought through all of that. So, whether or not it will change and mold, whatever, it probably will. But I think the core of it will not change.
Well, let's park there for a second. It is interesting. I have a soapbox topic or a theory that I love to run by. I have the pleasure of being a mentor for a local startup studio here in town, and I get to meet with their portfolio companies or their cohorts. And I always get to talk about culture. And one of the questions I ask them is, what are you building? And I ask that because I think there's two things founders can build. They can build a business, or they can build an organization. And I'm certain there are better ways to say what I'm saying, but the sentiment is, I've seen companies that have a great business offering because there's a market need, they have great timing, and they launch a business, and then they're a year or two in and they realize, well, what are our values? How do we want to behave? And I think of companies like Uber, Subway, where they built a massive business and then had to try to figure out what their culture would be, as opposed to organizations that set out to build an organization rooted in values, rooted in a mission and a vision. And then they hire great people. And then together, those great people with that mission, vision, and values go build a business, go build a great business. And I think of Cotopaxi, I think of Chick-fil-A, I think of Zappos, where they set out to like, hey, before we do anything, what do we want to be? Who do we want to attract? What do we want to be? Yes, we want to sell shoes. Okay. But the business model of how we're going to do that, let's get the right team in place. And of course, we want to sell chicken sandwiches, but we want people to feel really, really good about their experience. And so I just think that's a interesting way to slice and dice, or at least make one distinction between organizations that have great timing and a great business idea, but then find themselves scrambling to figure out why their culture is the way it is a year later, versus organizations that do it from the beginning. It sounds like you and Brianna, you're doing it from the beginning. The two of you were sitting around a table somewhere, and you were thinking about the kind of company you wanted to build. You knew you wanted to do marketing and influencer marketing, but you were automatically at the very beginning thinking about what we want to be like. So let me ask you this. When do you think you'll hire your first full-time person that's non-founder?
That's a great question. We're only a couple weeks in, so I can't necessarily give you a timeline. What I can say is that we are both very much in alignment that we intend to grow. So the company was not built with the intention of just having the two of us and freelancers.
Yeah, it's not a lifestyle business for you. We're building a business.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We are building something together. So I don't know. I don't know when that will be, but I do want to say something, not in response, but on top of what you were saying about a company, culture, business, the order of operations. What I think is really interesting, and granted, we have only been in business for a couple of weeks, but what we are finding is that there seems to be a theme amongst the people who have reached out to us to work with us. We did not expect this. Like, there is very clearly a common thread. And it really is that we are attracting mission-driven brands. And I think in some magical way, in our website, we're going to fix it and change it because we are like, oh my God, yes, like this is so inspiring.
This is our lane.
Yeah. Like, these are our ideal clients. Yes. But we don't say that anymore. And yet for some reason, like is attracting like. And so it's very inspiring to me to know that our culture is already permeating just from both of our personal brands and from our website and from doing events like this. And, Bree is invited quite often. She was just featured in Fast Company and like all of these things. But regardless of the media or medium in which we are expressing our beliefs, people resonate with what we have to say. And so I'm just like super grateful that we're attracting like who we want to attract to work with. Yeah. So it's great.
That's awesome. One of the other concepts I like to talk to the cohorts about is this idea of a minimum viable culture. in the tech world, there's minimum viable product, and that's, basically what it sounds like. It's like, what's the base model that we need to get out the door? What's the minimum we're going to have when we offer? And I like to talk about, as a founder of an organization, you've got to have some things in place as a minimum viable culture. They don't have to be all the things of a company culture, all the way from mission, vision, values, a compensation strategy, role clarity, communication, leadership. But you got to pick one or two that you want to stand on, because you need to be about something for that pitch to that prospective employee. And the other thing I also think is a big part of a minimum viable culture is the fact that it's unique. It's compelling and it's unique for you. And so I guess my question would be, what is something that is going to play out uniquely in your culture? Maybe you and Bree have talked about it, maybe you haven't, but I'm sure you might have a feeling. But like, what's the thing that's going to be uniquely compelling about your culture when you do go to hire people? What's something you guys have chosen to do differently?
Well, I think we have not discussed this actually, but I think like in our values, we have honesty and we have clarity. And I view this one as like the meshing of the two of them, which is transparency. Mm-hmm. And I think that being transparent with your employees and really letting them in and helping them understand the business, how you got to where you are, where you like the vision of where you see it going, being open about the finances of the business is really important. And I say that coming from an organization where I knew exactly where they stood. I knew exactly how much we needed to make each month and where the budget was and where we were running and where we needed to be. And it was not just a sales budget. It was like, this is the company. And it was a small company. But they said, we believe as the founders of this company that it is our responsibility to be transparent with you, our employees, so that you better understand, when we're saying we really need to do this, you can see on paper why. This is not just me saying I want to get rich and I want to do this, that, the other. It's like, no, we're all in this together. And so I think that transparency is really important. And it also, from my experience and like the way that I viewed it was, it gave me a feeling of ownership of like, I really was in this with them. It was not my boss and me, the employee. It was, no, we are all in this together. And I would hope that whoever and whenever we bring them on our team, that they become that additional team member that really feels like they're in this together with us and not just an addendum that got added on later. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think a unique challenge that you guys, I'm assuming, are wrestling with, and you've probably found the right path through it, is you're not together. You're in different states. You're both west half of the country, I think, but you're in different states. Obviously, I'm sure you're going to tell us that you're always on Teams calls, always on Zoom calls. How has building a culture worked with two people that are the 100% of the company and they're not together? Yep.
So we built the primary, like the main part of this business separately. And then I actually flew to Arizona the week before that we launched. So I spent the week working right next to Bree for that week. It was a great bonding opportunity. It was so nice to be able to just ask a question out loud and not have to text or Slack or what have you. But one thing that we really found was we work very differently. So I am far more likely to hop on a Zoom call with my camera on and want to talk to her like this than she's used to. So we've had to get used to working with each other. She loves to work asynchronously. She loves to just like, okay, what's the plan? Right. Great. I'm going to go do my work and then we'll reconvene. Whereas I'm like asking 85 questions in Slack, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I finally gotten her to the point where she's like, let's just hop on a call. So we do a lot of Slack huddles. And we actually text a lot. We're friends additionally. So we text a lot and, I'll be like, okay, are we ready to hop on Slack? Like, are we officially working yet? So by the time we both like sit down at our desk, then we're working. But we just, this business is our baby right now. And so we talk about it all day and all night,
Love it. Well, I'd love to shift back a little bit to Fairy Job Mom, which, by the way, I just think that is such a cool service that you provide. One of the most fulfilling things I've ever done was in the 2008-9 kind of downturn, a ministry called Work Matters that I'm a huge supporter of here in Northwest Arkansas, launched a program called the Joseph Project, which was intended to be a place for people that were caught up in a downsizing to come to get nourishment, to get love, to get feeding and fellowship, and then to get real job direction and coaching. Yeah. And I would get to come and present on, LinkedIn strategies or interview preparation and all that. There's just something special about being alongside someone who's in a career transition. Some people look at it as, this is the most amazing thing. I have an opportunity to change the trajectory of my family and my career, and I get to do this. And there are other people that are in very real situations of, I have to get a job. Like I got caught up in a downsizing. I need to get a role. And so that vulnerability of both of those scenarios is really fun, which I'm assuming is a big part of what attracted you to do it. And I love the way it naturally happened. You didn't sit down with a business plan to launch Fairy Job Mom. You found yourself being sought out by a lot of people for help. And you thought, there's something here. Like I could actually help people in a more structured way than just answering all of these LinkedIn reach outs and say, can I get 10 minutes? Can I get 5 minutes with you? So in the context of coming alongside people who are in a career transition or about to be in a career transition, what do you talk to them about as it relates to culture of an organization? Like, do you help them decipher the clues from the interview process of like what a culture will be like? What general advice or coaching do you give them when it comes to like assessing an organization's, a potential employer's culture?
Yeah. So I start with them, really most people, at the resume drafting creation process, shall we say. And so our conversations start about like, what type of company or organization do you want to work for? And I think that a lot of people skip that step. Like they just are like, I just need a job. I'm a marketing manager and I'm just going to go find a marketing manager job wherever. And you will be far more successful, in my opinion, if you take the time to really figure out what type of a company suits your work style, your personality, the culture that you're looking for, even like the work style of like, are they on camera all the time? Are they not on camera if it's a remote role? Or do they want you in office all the time? Like these are all things that you have to consider when you're considering where you're going to work. Of course, there are sites like Glassdoor, which definitely go look at those and go read reviews. I would take some
with the appropriate amount of
exactly.
Not skepticism, but discernment.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some off the rails ones, but if you start to see a bunch of off the rails ones, they're probably telling the truth.
Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah. And if, you see all 5 stars, okay, that's a good sign. Now, how can we broach this subject more and dig more? And I think that learning how to do outreach to people on LinkedIn, not just for a job.
Yeah.
To just have those exploratory conversations of like, hey, would love to hear about your experience there. What keeps you here? Why? Tell me, and there are ways in which you can phrase that so that either A, they will answer a direct question, or B, hopefully give you 10, 15 minutes of their time to just chat through it. But that's how I learn best, is through talking to people. And so I always recommend, if you can network, please do network. It's a win-win situation. You find out information and now you have a new friend. So that's one thing. The other thing is to really pay attention in the interview process. Like if you are successful in landing that interview, you are also interviewing them. So like, remember that interviewing is a two-way street. You hold power as well as a potential employee, and having the confidence to recognize that and respect that in yourself is really important as you embark on that process.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, this is like dating, right? So this is the best they're going to get. So if you're meeting with that recruiter and they're a jerk, that's a problem.
Yeah. You're getting their best jerk at that point.
Yeah. And you're meeting with the hiring manager and they're a jerk, that's a bigger problem because that's who you're going to directly report to, most likely. So those types of things we really have to pay attention to. Also, there comes a point where they say, do you have any questions? Hopefully you've done your research and you have some really great questions, some hard questions, some questions that are going to make them pause and have to give you some information that they might not have been planning on giving you. How they react to those questions is very telling. If they brush you off, that's not a good sign. Remember that them bringing that transparency that I mentioned earlier is really important. They should have nothing to hide, right? I don't think any company is perfect, but great companies are largely enjoyable and honest about that. Also, any company that won't talk to you about salary, that's a big red flag. I'm a firm believer that discussion should happen early and often, right? So when you meet with that recruiter, great, what's the range? If it's a range like this, tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's probably not a range. It's a vast landscape.
Yep. So, just you can weave that throughout the process. But I think too, even asking questions around how is diversity viewed? How is it approached? Do you have special groups? Or there's a lot of things that you can ask. But what I would also do is sit down and make a list of what's important to you.
Yes.
Right? Like if working in a diverse environment is not important to you, okay, I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, but don't ask questions about diversity if it doesn't matter to you.
Yeah.
Right? Think about what is your top 5 characteristics of an organization, and then think about what questions could I ask to find that information out. And I always like to say questions that are tell me about a time when. They're going to ask you those. Ask them.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Tell me about the last time the organization missed the number, and how was that communicated, and how did the organization respond to that? What are some other ones? What's another good tell me about a time when question for a company from a candidate?
Mine is similar to that. It's like a sales one, but also I was in sales largely, right? But one of my favorite questions is for a hiring manager specifically, not for a recruiter, how do you manage top performers? I want someone who's going to grow me no matter what. I don't care if I'm exceeding goal by 3,000.
Yeah.
Does that mean I get no management or no attention? I want to hear that. I want to hear, and then follow it up with, how do you coach underperformers? Yeah. Because what happens if I don't hit my number?
Yeah. No, that's great. You were talking earlier. I interpreted what we were talking about. What you were talking about is the need for authenticity, both directions. The worst thing that could possibly happen for either side of the equation is for you to hire somebody who they're not, or for you to join an organization that they're not. I had that happen. I coach people on this, and I will say my last experience in corporate America, I didn't do enough due diligence. Now, was it that you didn't do it, or that they were really good at showing up to an interview well?
I think it was probably a combination of both, because in my defense, when I looked at my job description that I signed, these are your duties and responsibilities, and I looked at what I was doing, 2 months down the line, they did not match. And I ended up bringing that up to my supervisor, manager, director, whatever you want to call them, right? And I was like, hey, wait a minute. This is actually what I was hired for. Please explain, please explain why, what is going on here? Yeah. It was not, what I was sold wasn't what I got. Yeah. And so that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is, from a due diligence perspective, I backdoored. I asked people about the person I was directly reporting to. Oh, he's a nice guy, whatever. He's a nice guy, but no one had ever reported to him. So I can be a nice person. I can be a great friend. I can be fun and exciting and all of these things. But unless you have spoken to someone that I have directly managed, you don't know what it's like to report to me. I could be a jerk. Right?
And especially if this is my first time, I'm going to be experimenting everything with you, because I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. So, I think that's also something to be cognizant of when you are thinking about who within an organization that you want to reach out to and hear from. Where do they fall in the totem pole? How are they related to the team that you would be working with? Someone in finance isn't going to be the same as talking to someone in sales if you're on a sales team.
Yeah. So it's okay to reach out to an accountant at the company you're interviewing with via LinkedIn and just say, hey, can I ask you a couple of questions? I mean, is that
I mean,
acceptable
you could.
protocol? Yeah.
I wouldn't, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. If you're curious about like just general company culture, that's fine. Do I think it's going to give you insights on your experience within that organization? Probably not.
Yeah.
And actually, this is going back to my story. This is actually what happened because I ended up joining a marketing team, but I knew people on the sales team. And in this particular company, the sales team had a much different experience than the marketing team. So be very cognizant of that as you're thinking about who you need to talk to. Is this an experience that will be similar to what you would have if you join that organization, or is it something totally different?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, this is good. I can't believe it, but we're heading up against our time window here. I do have one last question that I ask everybody, and I did warn you about this because I have not warned people before, and it doesn't go great because it's a thinker. It's a thinker. Music is a huge part of who I am. It's a big part of how I build cultures and organizations. I just shared the results of our first annual employee engagement survey that they've done since 2011. They haven't done one since 2011. And we did the readout today, and we hit every question, every grouping. We did E and PS, what broke it down. And I'm sure nobody noticed this. I had music playing before and after the meeting because for me, that's a big deal for me and the culture I want to build and for the atmosphere I'm comfortable working in. So therefore, hey, I'm about to share some pretty tough results that are pretty vulnerable for the leadership of the company to hear me share with the organization. I need to be in my zone. And my zone is listening to cool music and walk-up songs and all the things. So my question for you is, and I'm because of what you and Bree are doing, I'm going to serve it up this way. What's a song that captures the essence of the culture and the feel that you're trying to build at Verbatim? If you had an anthem.
This is very much from the employee side of things, right? So this is our internal feelings about Verbatim.
Yes, this isn't going to go in your marketing copy. This is what
we talked about it. Actually, after I hopped off the call with you, I messaged her and I was like, okay, what is our song? Very quickly, we agreed on this, which was incredible because I'm like, I vote that. She's like, I vote that too.
So, wow.
Yes. And there's a couple reasons. So number one, I love the song. It's a powerful song by a powerful woman who I think is just phenomenally talented.
The suspense is killing me.
Yes. So we selected Run the World by Beyonce.
Yes.
And we are two women who most recently were in the tech industry, which is overrun by men, particularly white men. We're two women of color building an empire of sorts. And we're ready to run the world of marketing. So that was our choice. And it's, girls, we run the world.
I love it. Man, I get answers from everybody. Some have thought them out. Not many of them have consulted with their co-founder, which I love. But that might be one of my favorite ones. Because I know what I know about you guys and what I know about what you're building, like then that's spot on. That is for what you're doing, for the energy that you both have, like all that. That's amazing.
I told Bree, we will be on a magazine cover someday.
I have no doubt.
So mark my words. I'm telling you today, October 26, 2023, you will see Brianna Doe and I on a magazine cover. I promise.
That's incredible. And I don't doubt it at all based on what I've seen you do, you and both do on LinkedIn, which is where I primarily get to interact with you. But okay. Well, Alexis, thank you so much. I don't see yet any questions in the chat. I haven't checked the Q&A. Matt, if you see any, let me know.
I didn't see any either.
Blake Benz has to have a question. There's no way he's going to join.
Was Blake planted?
No, but I'm glad to see his name. So Blake, he's passionate about culture. So Blake, what you got? And come off mute.
Oh, I see Q&A. Okay, hold on.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
How do you deal with
do
a job?
Deal with a job you truly love, but a boss who just can't seem to catch on to the idea of culture?
Yeah, I had that. I've lived that. So I think for me, what I did was I focused on the relationships that were truly fulfilling for me in that role. Unfortunately, that wasn't quite with my boss. Like, he was a super nice guy and we're actually now friends. But as a leader and as a boss, I wouldn't say that we were aligned in like style of management and as a direct report. But I really did love my job and I really loved my team. Like, I loved my team. So for me, it was more on focusing on the positives and also how I could take this job that I love and use it to propel my career than worry about my boss. Like, I kind of just I understood and like recognized the fact
back of the situation, right?
Yeah.
You took back and said, what do I really want out of this? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't getting it from him. So what I ended up doing, which was really interesting, was I found some mentors within the company that I leaned on as if they were my boss. So there was a woman who actually was in revenue. She was like my unofficial boss. Anytime I had an issue, I would just go to her, which would help me grow. There was another woman in sales who I respected tremendously. And when I put together a business plan that got me promoted, she helped me review it, not my boss. So like, lean on the people who are there for you and enjoy the job that you love. That's my advice.
I love it. And that talking about that, one of my favorite behavior-based interview questions, which we talked about those earlier, the tell me about a time when questions. One of my favorite ones that we ask candidates is actually one that I think would be a great question to ask about culture, about this situation of dealing with someone. And it's, tell me about a time when you had to maintain a productive relationship with someone that you didn't see eye to eye with, or didn't click with, or didn't jive.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Ask that to the interviewer to see what it's like at that organization when there's, either misalignment or worse, conflict.